Manscaped is back. They're back, and they are offering precision engineered tools for the family jewels. That's just what it is. They obsess over their technology developments to provide you the best tools for your grooming experience. It's trusted by over 2 million men worldwide, and I could say at least one of the three on this podcast. Manscaped, great products from top to bottom. Everything I've ever used from there has been awesome. And you can get whatever you order from Manscaped for 20% off with the code DNVR. They hooked up the DNVR fam with a bunch of different stuff. And you can check it all out at manscaped.com. So make sure you check out manscaped.com and use the code DNVR when you check out to get 20% off your entire order.
Number one for the one and only DNVR. 2 goes out to Zach, Mace, RK, and the bar. 3 for Mr. B in that old trophy case. Number 4 we're still waiting for. Well, bring on the chase. Out on the field, a mile high, Broncos win is our desire. Couple with a breakfast crew and a friendly orange and blue to the bitter end. Come and join us at the DNVR. We are DNVR.
Welcome in to the DNVR Broncos podcast on a Monday. Of course, DNVR Broncos podcast presented by MSU Denver Online. Make sure you check them out, msudenver.edu/online to see all they have to offer. We're talking rigorous and affordable programs taught by professors who bring the real world into the classroom. No better way to further your education than at MSU Denver. And if you are someone who needs to work a full-time job while you're getting that education, well, MSU Denver is the place to do it because MSU Denver graduates work twice as many hours as any other institution in Colorado. So make sure you check them out at msudenver.edu/online and thank them for being the presenting sponsor of this show.
My boys, what's shaking? Thank you guys for being here today. Thank you everyone who's joining us live on YouTube, and special shout out to my friend the Nagulator in the comment section. Guys, how was your weekend?
Oh man, it was a great weekend. Top to bottom, honestly. It's capped off by that Saturday in which the Avs, Nuggets, Buffs, and yes, even the Rams all won on Saturday, and the DNVR bar was having a grand old time.
Oh man, what a weekend, especially like you said, especially a Saturday. Bar is popping off. This is starting to feel pretty good in Colorado, isn't it?
We like winning. We hope that the Nuggets and Avs can keep it up, and the Buffs.
And we have will there be winning this year, guys, in the fall with the Broncos?
Well, that is the overarching question. And, of course, it always comes back to the quarterback position. And news broke today that I think is really interesting when it comes to the Broncos quarterback situation and if they move forward with Drew Lock. Because it's come out this morning that the Washington football team is going to move on from Alex Smith, making him a free agent. And I know we've talked a lot about the young hedge, the upside hedge, I think as we've been calling it. But, man, if you're going to go the veteran hedge route, which I think the Broncos are very interested in doing if they end up rolling with Drew Lock, I think Alex Smith is at the top of the list in terms of guys who would be a really good fit and guys who would be, a nice mix in that room with Drew Lock.
Well, and what's interesting about Alex Smith is even though he's 36 years old and very much a veteran guy, he kind of feels like he has a little bit of upside still. And that's why we like the young guys, because we say they're the young guys with upside. Alex Smith, in a weird way, feels like he still has that. Now, his upside is more so what he can do in a season or 2 seasons. It's not Jameis Winston may turn into the 10-year starter for the Broncos. No. You're not talking about that with Alex Smith. But his upside for a single season is very intriguing. And also, what you immediately get with him, guys, is a stabilizing force, someone that comes into that quarterback room and just everything feels calm now because Alex Smith is there, and you know what he can bring to the table.
Well, the reason why you think there might be some upside there is, first of all, you look at what he did last year coming off of that horrific injury and the aftermath of it that caused him to miss the entire 2019 season. And you say, wow, I mean, this guy had literally a near-death experience because of complications because of that. I mean, he nearly lost his leg, and here he was. He did his statistically not impressive overall, 6 touchdowns, 8 picks last year, but he did complete 2/3 of his passes, and Washington as a team got better when he was on the field. And so with any player, whether you're talking about ACL, or fractured fibula, whatever the injury, typically it's not what they do in that first year back from the injury. It's what they do the second year back once they've gotten past the whole thing of thinking about that injury when they get back on the field. And that's why I think it's logical to see some upside in Alex Smith to say, all right, just because last year really didn't match up to anything he did in Kansas City or even what he did in Washington in 2018, can he get back to his previous level now that he's another year removed from that injury? And that's why I think it's fair to say there's some upside, even though he is going to be turning 37 this year.
Yeah, and the last time that Alex Smith was a starting quarterback for an entire season, you have to go all the way back to 2017. But guys, 26 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He led the league with a 1% interception percentage. That was the best in the league. He was not making mistakes. And he was legitimately in the MVP conversation, guys, throughout a lot of that season, threw for 4,000 yards. So that's where you look back and you see, okay, you can get a baller and he can turn into a very, very good player. But then, guys, I'm not going to lie. I do hesitate because I think of, okay, well, is this the Joe Flacco stuff that we were talking about? Where when the Broncos signed Joe Flacco, we're going, okay, maybe you get a good quarterback if he goes back to his 2015 version, and you have to go so far in the past. Now, obviously, Joe Flacco played that entire time and just continued to get worse. Alex Smith has gone through a huge roller coaster of events since that 2017 season, but there is concern for me there saying you have to look back all the way to 2017 for when he was playing really well.
Okay, Zach, would you take 2018 Alex Smith then? Right before the injury, 10 touchdowns, 5 picks, 85.7 rating, completed 63% of his passes. So his interception percentage, it was at 1.5, which is really right about where he was for his entire Kansas City years. But if we're looking at how you make the team better, Washington was in a playoff position before he got hurt. Does that give you reason to believe that, okay, maybe he can be somebody the Broncos can trust and have some success with?
Well, hold on. I think we need to establish what his role is here, because to me, I'm not thinking about a full season as a starter. To me, I'm thinking, okay, you have a guy who is a backup who can come in and certainly keep you in games and potentially win you games if Drew Lock goes down. Or if Drew Lock starts off to just a terrible start and you need to pull the plug on that entire operation, well, then you trust Alex Smith to steady the ship. But, I don't want to think about this from the lens of what's he going to do as a full season as a starter, because there's no scenario, in my opinion, in which it's a good thing that he comes in and is a full season starter for the Broncos.
Well, and then you have Jared in the comment section saying Alex Smith is too good to be a backup. So, Ryan, if that's the case, then are you just not signing him? If he wants to be, paid like a starter and come in like a starter and be given the job right when he signed, if you're the Broncos, are you saying, no, thank you?
Yeah, I mean, if he wants to go be a starter, like the CFL, I think is hiring.
Wow.
Oh, come on.
I don't think he's a starter in the NFL right now.
No, but, all these quarterbacks that could be coming to Denver are going to believe that they could start. I mean, that was one thing with Ryan Fitzpatrick, for example. There was a story in the Miami Herald last week saying that Fitz wants to go somewhere where he believes he can be the starter. And that's why there may be some fire to the smoke about the Broncos' interest in him. And frankly, guys, all of these type of quarterbacks that we're talking about here, if it's not going to be Deshaun Watson or Dak Prescott, ultimately, they're all going to believe that they can come in and beat out an incumbent who was in the bottom 2 to 5 quarterbacks across the board. I mean, yes, Drew Lock does have potential, but that's how they're viewing it from the outside.
Well, there's no doubt Denver guys could be the most intriguing spot for any veteran quarterback looking for a chance, or even like a Jameis Winston type, because he could come in and believe that they're going to be the instant starter right away. And this could honestly be like a last chance for a quarterback to get one more shot, whether it's the veteran type to be a starter. So that makes Denver potentially a very intriguing spot for one of these guys.
Exactly. And that's a weird leverage point that the Broncos have here. Like, they don't have much leverage with many players, just in terms of where the franchise is right now. But with veteran quarterbacks, they kind of do have a nice little opportunity to say, hey, if you come here, we're going to give you a chance to start. Now, to be honest, I think they would be lying to them, because I think Drew Lock, if Drew Lock's still on the roster, basically, I think that there's a very good chance that he will be the starter come week 1. But you can tell these guys, hey, we're going to make it a camp competition, blah, blah, blah. You get a little discount. And
we'll let the boys over at DNVR Broncos do quarterback competition throughout camp.
Yes, exactly. What I will say, though, is while I think the Broncos are very interested in this route, I just hate this route. It doesn't make sense to me because, again, now that George Paton is here, you're kind of on a 6-year plan, in my opinion, or at least a 4-year plan, trying to get this team back to the top of the mountain. And I just don't understand how bringing in Alex Smith so that if Drew Lock starts 1-3 with, 6 touchdowns to 9 interceptions or something, why it would benefit the Broncos to bring in Alex Smith to go 8-8 or go 500 the rest of the way, end up 2 games under 500, and end up just higher in the draft rankings. And all you did was, split the remaining 12 games of the season.
Well, the thing is, I mean, sitting here, the three of us, we can think in those terms and it's logical, but how do you sell that to Vic Fangio? How do you sell that to the players? That you say, okay, it's not going well, but we went for a crap backup option again, and so we really don't have anywhere we can turn to. We went to the Jeff Driscoll pool that we're just gonna lose games this year and get a higher draft pick. And I mean, I think we can say that, but you can't sell that to the team. You can't sell that to the coaches. And so that's why I think really kind of the best case scenario about all this is if you do go to a backup and the backup does play well and gets the season going, you have to think of it the way that Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane thought of things in Buffalo in 2017. Going to the playoffs that year was not in the Bills' plans, fellas, but they did. They went 9-7. Felt good for everybody in Buffalo. They hadn't been to the playoffs since 99. People were at the airport greeting the players, ecstatic. But then they get to the offseason, clear their minds, and it did not change one iota of their long-term plan. They didn't get fooled by it. They knew they needed a long-term quarterback and to get in position to get him, and that's how they end up with Josh Allen. So there's a way that you can have the path of doing the most for this season, but also being clear-minded to know that when you get to next offseason, you're still going out and saying getting the guy is the priority, no matter what it costs in terms of draft capital.
I mean, this is absolutely a signing if they do it for Vic Fangio to say for George Paton to say, Vic, can you be here next year? Convince me, and I will give you a guy that you can do it with. And guys, I kind of have no doubt in my mind with Vic Fangio and Pat Shurmur leading this team this year, if Alex Smith is signed, he's the starting quarterback. Now, I don't think it'll be given to him right away. I think it will be talked about as a competition. But just what did we hear preached over and over and over again last year is turning the ball over, turning the ball over. We can't do it. We can't do it. Drew Lock last year was tied for the worst in the league in terms of interceptions, and he also had some fumbles. Alex Smith, he may not light up the world, but he's not going to turn the ball over unless he continues what he did last year with 8 interceptions in the few games that he played. But if he reverts back to just the Alex Smith of what he was, not even the 2017, just who Alex Smith is, just a very mistake-free guy. So the question is, when we're thinking about this, is what are we doing here? What's the point of this season? Because Mace, I totally see what you're saying. I think Vic would be happy with an Alex Smith sign. He'd probably like that more than a first-round quarterback for him going into this season. But what's George Payton thinking? Does he want a guy to come and stabilize the ship for a season and, kind of just take that next step? Or is he looking for more of a long-term plan?
Well, I think it's interesting also with Alex Smith, you mentioned the turnover thing, and over time, he protects the football. In fact, I wrote about Tyrod Taylor in that arc this weekend. So if you're the Broncos, when you're looking for this quarterback, are you looking for somebody who maybe is like an older Drew Lock in terms of how he pushes the ball down the field, like a Ryan Fitzpatrick? Or are you looking for somebody who brings what Drew Lock doesn't have, which is the ability to protect the football well? And that's where you're talking about Alex Smith. You're talking about Tyrod Taylor, because in the past 4 years, those guys are in the top 6 quarterbacks in terms of how well they protect the football.
Well, and then so John Houston here, thank you so much for the super chat. He brings up an interesting comment. He says, absolutely no one is going to sign Alex Smith to be a starter. Smith could really teach Locke how to be a pro and cut out mistakes. And that is a narrative that I want to discuss here. Is that a thing? Because, man, over the last few years in the NFL, I really feel like this narrative has kind of been put to sleep. I don't think quarterbacks are coming into places to teach guys and all that stuff anymore. It just doesn't feel that way. And like you guys mentioned, I think anyone who comes to Denver thinks they're coming here to win the starting job, not to help Drew Lock become a better pro. Now, there might be some learning that happens just by being around a guy like that. But I just don't think, Alex Smith is spending extra hours at the facility trying to teach Drew Lock what he did wrong on this, that, and how he can improve that. Maybe I'm being, I guess I'm being pessimistic about this. I just don't see that. I don't see that happening, really.
No. And there's two things with this that jump to mind. Is some people say, look what happened with Patrick Mahomes when he was able to sit behind Alex Smith for a year. Guys, Patrick Mahomes was going to be this good. Maybe he had, he got some knowledge from that year, but Patrick Mahomes, the Alex Smith effect didn't make him Patrick Mahomes. I can guarantee that. So let's just put that to bed. And the second thing, guys, is Alex Smith will want to be a starter here, and he's not going to come in and be a mentor. And some people I've seen say, Fitzpatrick, all these guys can be a mentor for Drew. If Drew needs a mentor in order to go from last year to being a good starting quarterback in this league, then he's not the guy. He's not going to become a good starting quarterback in this league if he needs that mentor, because that's just not how it works. That's not the case.
And if it's the mentor you're looking for, probably Fitzpatrick is the best guy, because he's got the most experience in that role and he's handled it well, and in particular handled the situation in Miami last year exceptionally well, given that they shouldn't have benched him. He did not deserve to be benched when he did. And indeed, when they called on him the rest of the season, he played well. And so if that is the primary goal, to find somebody who can be a good sounding board, a good teacher, and oh, by the way, if he has to play, can give you a chance, then Fitzpatrick is the guy. And the other thing with Alex Smith, to his credit, Patrick Mahomes, everybody knew he was going to be starting by 2018. So that 2017 season with the Chiefs, he's got a lot of questions about the fact that he's probably not going to be around the next year, that basically is keeping the seat warm, that there is a time limit on his time there in Kansas City. And He handled that situation so well. There were no problems, no locker room issues. So that is a feather in his cap. But again, if mentorship is the number one category, you'd probably put Ryan Fitzpatrick atop that list. You'd probably put Tyrod Taylor ahead of Alex Smith as well.
Guys, I just don't think that mentorship will be high on the Broncos chart when they're looking at, what they want in their next quarterback that they sign. We know that they're not fully in on Drew Lock. If they were fully in on Drew Lock, then Mace, I think you're right. Being a mentor would probably be number one on the list because it would be all about Drew. But I don't think that, and from everything we've heard, they're not all in on Drew. So I don't think that's a big deal in this at all.
It's really, I don't know. I think that you have to look at it that way. If you're bringing in one of these veteran guys, like you have to hope that that's an added benefit. Because again, I think when the Broncos bring in this veteran, if they do that, it's because they are trying to avoid what happened last season, where Drew Lock goes down and they have nowhere to turn, which was so poorly managed by them throughout the offseason. It hurts. But I think that's the main reason why they're bringing this guy in. And so when they have this guy to fall back on for two different reasons, although I think the main reason they're thinking is if Drew Lock gets hurt, I think you also have to have in mind, okay, but we also want this guy to add a presence to the room that Drew Lock can benefit from. Because again, when you bring whoever it is, whether it's Alex Smith, Nick Foles, or some other guy, that you're not getting a long-term answer out of that guy. You're still hoping that you're getting a long-term answer out of Drew Lock.
And the other thing you have to hope for is if this guy is the backup, that he doesn't cause problems, that he doesn't undermine the starter, that he doesn't become a divisive negative figure in the locker room. And that's why you do look and say, okay, how did they handle awkward situations before? How did they deal with it? Did they cause problems or not? Like someone like Marcus Mariota, for example, who's a younger guy, you're not bringing him in to be a mentor. But if there's a competition and Drew Lock wins it, Mariota has shown back in 2019 with the Titans when he lost his job to Ryan Tannehill, Mariota has shown that he's not going to be a divisive figure in the locker room, that he is going to support the guy who beat him out, that he's going to have his back, that he's going to be very much a one for all for one guy. And so maybe mentorship isn't the most important thing, but having the character and the dignity and discipline to handle being the number two without causing problems, if that's how it works out, that might be the most important characteristic here, assuming they meet a certain baseline of experience and talent.
Amazing. My question to you, though, is when you look at these guys, is there anyone that is available that gives you a red flag about that? Because when I go around, there's no one. Like you said, Marcus Mariota, Jameis Winston even took a backseat, not just to Drew Brees, but to Taysom Hill, and he was fine with that. You also look at Tyrod Taylor. I mean, he had the worst situation ever last year where he could have gone crazy just about how the team handled him, literally handled his body, and he was very good. So I don't really know if there's any guy, Ryan Fitzpatrick may be the one that you could say was the worst with it because he just came out and said, how disappointed he wasn't. And I don't think anyone blamed him for that. Yeah. And I'm not saying he handled that situation poorly because he didn't. But I mean, I don't think there's anyone that you look at that's available and you say, that guy concerns me about how they're going to handle themselves.
Cam Newton. I don't know how he'd handle that.
Oh, yeah. I haven't even thought about him as a realistic possibility.
Well, you've seen some people on some fans on social media discussing him. So that's why he jumps out. The thing with Fitzpatrick being disappointed, he basically he almost had like a 24-hour rule on it, or basically I think it was kind of 48 hours, where he just took that short time to express disappointment and frustration. Then he cut it off right then and there. At that point, he moved on. Team moved on. He moved on. And then when they needed him, and this is another thing that comes into play, because with Drew Lock, you have somebody who's had multi-week injuries the last couple of years. When the team needed Fitzpatrick to step in on short notice, he delivered.
Yep, he did. So, guys, I gotta get you on the record. If they sign Alex Smith, who is the starting quarterback come week one?
Drew Lock.
Mace?
Alex Smith.
Yeah, and I think it's Alex Smith as well.
That would be just terrible for the Broncos. Just terrible. It's Joe Flacco all over again. It's Case Keenum all over again. There's no means to an end there. Like you're just winning games for no reason. Like you're going to win. Maybe you're going to win more games than you would if Drew Lock was a starter. And there's no payoff there. You didn't do it. You didn't earn anything. You didn't do anything.
So no, and I agree with you, Ryan. It would be, what are we doing here? But what if George Paton thinks, oh my gosh, well, what if Alex Smith can play till he's 42 or 43 like Tom Brady? And then it's not just this 1 year plan. He's actually thinking about, I'll even go to 41. He's thinking about Alex Smith being a 4-year quarterback, 4-year starter for them. And, hoping, again, I'm not saying this is right or what I would do, but he's hoping that for 4 of those years, you can get the 2017 Alex Smith, 26 touchdowns, 5 picks. Let's go, baby.
It's just not, you're not winning a Super Bowl with 37-year-old post-injury Alex Smith. It's just not happening. Like in today's day and age in football, I think the best case scenario there is you go 10-6 and you maybe win 1 playoff game. But it's just like, why would that be? You've got 4 years as George Paton to get this thing figured out. That is not the path that's going to get there. And as John Houston again chimes in with another super chat, which we appreciate, he says, why would you start Smith? It's backtracking. I completely agree. You're going back to a formula that has failed here twice now in the last 5 years.
So there's no value in going, say, 10-6 and winning a playoff game when you've missed the playoffs 5 consecutive years. I think there is value in that in terms of trying to reestablish a winning culture. But the key is you have to view it properly. The fear that I would have is that you could go 10-6 and Alex Smith could be all right, but then you could delude yourself into thinking that, okay, this is a 3 to 4 year option. And that's why I keep coming back to what Buffalo with Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott did, because they had such clear minds about what they were when they were a wild card team in 2017. They didn't fall for that. They accepted that playoff appearances as evidence that they were changing the culture, that they were doing some good things, but they didn't let it change their long-term plan at quarterback. And so that's what I would hope George Paton would do. If they got to 10-6 with Alex Smith, they'd say, okay, great. You know what? We got some good feelings in our locker room. These kids learned how to win, but we're going to go get our quarterback next spring in the draft.
But wait, guys. If this team goes from 5-11 to 10-6 and Alex Smith didn't hit a wall at the end of the season and played just as good throughout the whole season, you're obviously rolling with him next year in 2022.
Yeah, but I'm talking about that as the ceiling. Like that. I think that's as good as things can get. I think most likely you're going to go 8-8 or 7-9 all over again. And you're going to have nothing figured out. You're going to have a middle of the first round pick. And, you're back where you started, except you've moved back at the draft and you're in a worse situation now. If they went 10-6 with Alex Smith and won a playoff game, I do believe that would be beneficial. I think that's the best case scenario. And as we know, it just rarely works out that way. I mean, the best case scenario last year was something along those lines, or even better. Well, then everyone got injured and, you are where you are now. So to me, you should be making moves in which the best case scenario is you eventually win a Super Bowl. And I just don't think that type of move helps you on that path.
What if it's a season like Chicago had last year? 8-8. You have to play 2 quarterbacks because they went through Foles and Trubisky, and they get into the playoffs and they're one and done. Is there any benefit in that type of season?
Well, look at the Bears. Do you feel like they have their direction figured out?
Their direction, I think, is trying to get Russell Wilson.
Yeah, exactly. So they're in the same place as the Broncos are right now, trying to upgrade the quarterback position.
Except that you have guys on the roster that at least know what it's like to be in the playoffs, whereas the Broncos have precious few of those guys that even have the roadmap in their mind to success. And maybe part of that is giving giving the kids on the roster, because it's still a young team, giving the kids kind of the glimpse of saying, okay, this is what you have to do to get there. But then these are the steps you need to take further to go beyond that.
I mean, yes, there is a little bit of value in that, but we'll keep an eye on the Bears next season, especially if they don't upgrade the quarterback position with a once in a lifetime trade for Russell Wilson, or somehow they get Deshaun Watson or something like that. To me, they're going to be exactly where they were, and the chances are they probably take a step back and miss the playoffs. So I want to make moves that have an end game. And I just don't know if bringing in Alex Smith and starting him has any end game.
So, Ryan, I have to ask, though, what moves this offseason have an end game that you would be okay with the quarterback? Obviously, we know the big trades, Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, signing Dak Prescott, I would imagine would all fall in the acceptable for you. I would also think that you could convince yourself a first-round quarterback would do that. Anything else?
No. I mean,
Jameis
not
Winston?
even Jameis.
Well, okay, yeah, I could get on board with Jameis.
But is he the only free agent really that can give you that end game you want? Because I agree, we all want the high upside play. But if it's Jameis or bust in free agency, then what are you doing at quarterback?
Well,
Mariota.
I think Drew Lock is an end game, is a potential end game.
But I'm saying, what are you doing at quarterback to supplement that?
You just find a backup for him that can actually win a game. If they need to. So to me, again, that I'm fine with Alex Smith as long as internally the team knows he's not going to be the starting quarterback. Because he's a great backup at this point in his career. I don't think he can give you anything that you're looking for as a starting quarterback. So for me, yeah, I would rank starting Alex Smith below starting Drew Lock, below starting any of those great quarterbacks you mentioned, below starting Jameis Winston, below starting a first-round quarterback. I mean, it is way down the list for me in terms of acceptable solutions at the quarterback position. I would much rather the Broncos go 5-11 again with Drew Lock and say, okay, this is over. We got to pull the plug on this and figure it out, than go 8-8 or even 9-7 with Alex Smith.
Okay, you say that right now, but do you really want to be sitting here at the end of this season with another 5-11 season? Because this has been agony for Broncos country.
But
if they can't be a playoff team, you don't want to be 5-11. You want to be 2-14. Like you're 5-11 is kind of more of that. Is more of that purgatory. At least if you get to 9 or 10 wins and you're in the playoffs, then you got something out of it. Whereas 5-11, you're getting bupkis.
Yeah, but I mean, well, you're getting a higher draft pick, and
but not maybe not high enough to get to the Sam Howell, Spencer Rattler, Keaton Slovis conversation without a trade up. You're still having to deal to move up.
Fair enough. I would still much rather be at pick number 9 than pick number 16. To me, that's enough of a jump that it's just not worth it for this. And I don't think it's 9-10 wins. I think it's 8. I do think like 8 wins is what you're getting out of Alex Smith. So again, you also have to look around. Okay, so what quarterback do you have in the division? Do you still have the 4th best quarterback in the division? Yes. So it's not a good solution to me. There's a lot of decent solutions. And again, rolling the dice on Drew Lock, I still think is a much better solution. And I'm talking about the floor there of going 5-11, which I think is kind of if it all goes wrong again for Drew Lock, then that's where you're at again. But I think Drew Lock has just as good of a chance of going 8-8 or better with this team as Alex Smith does.
Okay, I hate to do the QB wins thing, but
wow.
Can either of you guys tell me when was the last time the team that Alex Smith played for in the games he started was below 500?
Probably when he was in San Francisco.
2010.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Like even Washington in 2018 had a winning record when Alex Smith started. And of course he did well in Kansas City. And then those last couple of years in San Francisco, they were a team that was pushing for the Super Bowl. I mean, he is somebody who makes the people around him better.
I don't want to be too harsh, though, but, I mean, that's an Alex Smith that had 2 very well-working legs.
That is true. But even last year,
Ouch.
Washington got better when Alex Smith was out there. They made that surge at the end. They beat Pittsburgh. With Alex Smith there. There is, it's not quantifiable, but there is something to the leadership angle. The ability to maximize the players around him, to bring a team together. And that is something that, to his credit, Alex Smith has been doing very well for a decade now.
And if you're doing this, guys, that you are telling yourself that this is what Mace is saying, a step in the right direction, that this isn't the end game. And just as John Houston says, coming in one more time with the super chat, really appreciate that, John. He says, so tired of this team looking for washed Band-Aids. And I think we all are. Yeah. And where I'm at with Ryan is I'm so done with the mediocrity and like just, you know, a little below average, a little below mediocrity. This team either needs to be really bad where they realize, okay, it's time to really, really rebuild right now, or they need to be looking to get that guy that can do it. And the thing is, I'm right in between you two, Ryan. I think Alex Smith isn't the best choice to get where you need to be, but I think he is going to be the starter if they sign him. And that kind of falls in between, you know, the worst for you.
Yeah, I think that's the worst case scenario for the Broncos. And honestly, it would be worrisome for me just about George Payton's philosophies. Because that's to me a full-on Band-Aid, to use the term that John Houston used. And that it's just, I really do think it sets the plans back rather than moving the plans forward.
Yeah, and one thing that George Payton may want to avoid is if you start with Alex Smith and you bring him in, you are in the Band-Aid mode. And Payton just saw what life was like with Band-Aids and short-term solutions at quarterback in Minnesota, because for a good chunk of his time there, they were just trying to kind of figure it out from year to year. Now, they had some bad luck. Like, for example, Teddy Bridgewater getting hurt. That was bad luck. He could still be their quarterback today if he doesn't get injured. But they had to try so many different solutions that I can see why George Payton may look at this that we're talking about and say, nah, this isn't what I want, because I don't want to start going down the path to that pattern in Minnesota where we had to change quarterbacks every 2 to 3 years.
So, guys, one word answer here has to be yes or a no. Would you be okay with the Broncos signing Alex Smith in a couple of weeks?
Yes, as long as they have the right
one
plan
word.
behind it.
No, one word, Mace.
I mean, what are my other options?
Nope. Yes or no. Yes or no.
I'd be okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm gonna go no, just because of what we talked about, guys. It doesn't make sense. He's not the worst. He's not the worst plan, but it just wouldn't go. You know, if you're meh on the quarterback position, then what are you doing? What are we doing here?
I'd still prefer the younger upside hedge. If they can't get a Dak or Deshaun, or they're not going in the draft, I'd still prefer it to be Jameis Winston or Marcus Mariota, or I could even be talked into Mitchell Trubisky, at least somebody where you could say, if they take these steps, they can be more than just a bridge.
Man, how about that? Ryan just goes this whole pod just trashing Alex Smith, and then he says he'd be okay with it. I defend Alex Smith, and I say no. And of course, Mace.
I'm in the middle ground. That's where I live.
Middle ground, Mace.
Yeah.
For me, it's just I trust the organization if they're going to make that move to do it in the right way, not with the idea of making him the starter, at least to start the season. Guys, we made it 38 minutes without talking really much at all about Deshaun Watson, but did want to check in on the odds over at DraftKings Sportsbook, as we always do. Broncos still sitting at plus 400. Plus 400, tied with the Bears, just behind the Carolina Panthers at plus 300, and just behind the Houston Texans at plus 250. What's really interesting to me here is just that there's no heavy favorite. Even the Texans are just right there in the pack. The best thing for me is there's wherever you think he's going to go, there's really good value. And if you think that he's going to be trapped in Houston, That's really good value at plus 250. So, a lot of people out there screaming and yelling, he's not going to ever leave Houston. He's never going to become available. Well, you could profit off of that very nicely if you believe that so strongly.
Yes, you could. You very well could. Because what did he start at is Houston? Wasn't he like minus 500 to stay with the Texans or something crazy when this all started?
I think the lowest it ever was minus 250.
Okay.
So, we're on the complete opposite side of that now at plus 250.
Yep, exactly. And it's where he plays his first snap, right?
Yes. First team to play one snap for in 2021.
So he could end up with the Broncos, but the Texans could win that bet.
Yeah, man, I have a hard time seeing that happening. But a lot of people still really think that the Texans are going to hold out. I just think the Texans are – I don't even think that they internally believe that they're keeping Deshaun Watson. I just think they're doing the song and dance to try and build his value, to try and see if they can – there's probably they're holding out 5% hope that something changes. He has a change of heart, whatever it may be. But I think internally they know eventually they're going to have to pull this trigger. While they might be ignoring these voicemails, they've got a notebook where they've written down every single offer. They're already ranking them, pros and cons. That's what I believe. I know a lot of people believe the exact opposite of me on that, but I do think before the draft, or at least during the draft, this trade gets done. When they realize this is the last time we'll really know what we're getting in this package. Because again, whoever you trade Deshaun Watson to is not going to have a high draft pick anymore. So if you're trading him to the Broncos, 9 is probably going to be the highest draft pick you ever get from the Broncos in this deal.
Yep, man, it just sounds like a hopeless romantic. The Houston Texans just chasing the girl that they're never going to get, that has already rejected them, and they're just still holding out hope.
But it's not even like they're in the friend zone. Like they're in the hate zone.
Right. They started in a relationship.
Disdain for you.
Yep. She's blocked your number.
Yeah.
And then, in fact, actually, you guys met 10 days ago just for her to say, we're done. We're done. I'm never coming back to you.
Well, you didn't meet her. You met kind of an intermediary. I mean, even though David Culley is the coach, I mean, basically he's kind of the intermediary friend between Cal McNair and Deshaun Watson, like saying, okay, well, we do this and this, and then the friend goes back and then the friend has to go back and say, yeah, I gotta level with you. He's never coming back.
Yeah.
He hates you.
And Cal's like, well, he hasn't told that to my face, so I'm still holding out hope, and that's why we talk about why Deshaun needs to come out at some point if he wants this to truly end and the Texans to truly deal him. He needs to come out and talk to Cal, whether it's via video or an actual phone call himself.
He should just say his goodbyes to Houston. Just do the same thing that JJ Watt did after he was released,
right?
But just before, just be like, I just want to thank Houston for everything. I'm sorry it ended this way. But yeah, a public statement from Deshaun. That's going to be the next big shift in these odds, in my opinion. That's when you're going to see, if that happens, the Texans probably move out of the favorite spots for good.
Oh, for sure. If he does that, they have to fall.
Yep. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, this was a great discussion, guys. I love the way it turned out. There was a lot of teeter-tottering and moving back and forth. And
who knew you loved Alex Smith?
Yeah, huge Alex Smith as a backup guy. But that's going to wrap things up, I think, on the live side. Plenty of more Broncos talk coming on the second half of the podcast, which you can only get in podcast form. So if you like this, if you enjoy this, go check us out on iTunes or anywhere else you get your podcast, DNVR Broncos podcast. But that's where we're going to take the rest of this show. Thanks to everyone who tuned in. We'll catch you guys later.